Okay, Bob, you're telling me a story about you run a fire and
So not far from here, this would have been around 1976, maybe 77. I was on a little crew and fire crew here on the Tano National Forest, and it was country kind of like this, more junipers, less turbinella oak. Oak is this little stuff, and um, and the fire started in a mining camp. And this mining camp, was an old mining claim, and it had trailers full of mining gear and heavy equipment. And then there was explosives, obviously, because all these mining camps have explosives around here, especially back in those days, I guess. And we knew the camp. We knew the camp was there, and so the fire, we get a recall. There's a fire started. They say the location. We knew it was in this old mining camp. And so we're driving in this truck. There's just four of us in this truck, and we're driving to the fire. And going into this, where the mining camp was, we had to go through a riparian area, and there was big sycamore trees. And the sycamore trees were on fire. And so the crew boss, I was just like the fourth person on a four-person crew kind of a thing. And we're driving in, and the sycamores are fully involved, and we're driving underneath them. Um, I think that was probably the first time I ever drove through fire like that. I mean, in my career, I'd done it a lot more times since then, but that was the first time I'd ever done it. Exciting. Well, the fire, when we got through all the riparian to the mining camp, the buildings are on fire in the mining camp. So we assumed the fire started. There was no one there, there's no trucks there, but we assumed that the fire started in the equipment, whether it was, maybe it was from, some electricity or something. Anyway, fire started, and now it was spreading into the brush and taking off up this hill. So the crew boss said, "Okay, let's park here, get gear up, and we'll start flanking this fire as it's going up the hill." Now the riparian area is down low, or the mining camp is down at the bottom of this little riparian area, and we're going to go up this hill and get up to the ridge top, and then you could see that we'd get to the ridge top and we would start flanking the fire. Now there's just four of us, and it's in fuel type like this. All you can do, all we could do, four people, is scratch a line, and in places you couldn't even much scratch a line very quickly. So we took juniper branches. Now here there's been a fire recently and the juniper is kind of burned up. But we'd take juniper boughs, cut off, take a Pulaski, cut off a juniper branch, and then you just you would wait for the fire to get into the grass away from the brush, because you can't do anything in the brush with trying to swat the fire out. And so we would just walk and swat the fire out with the juniper bough and put the fire out where it's in the grass and not even have a fire line. It's just we're creating a black line. Well, we were about halfway
and
up.
this is a natural fire. This wasn't a fire that you set.
No, this is a natural fire.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a wildfire,
Okay.
and
You weren't doing any backfires.
we
Okay.
weren't doing backfiring, and so we were about halfway up this hillside up to the ridge, and the fire's burning in the heavy equipment and all that area, storage area for the mine. And there was an explosion, and the explosion was so strong it knocked us all down. Now we were probably 100 yards up the hill from this mining camp, and whatever explosives or whatever it got into and blew up, the shock wave knocked us all down onto our face down. And I remember I was the last one in the group. And when we all got knocked down, of course, it scares the crap out of you. And everybody gets up, and everybody's like touching themselves, grabbing each other. Are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah, yeah, I'm okay. And then the crew boss just says, "Get out of here! Let's get out of here!" And up the hill we run and get away. Now, so that piece of the line that we were working on, of course, that was going to keep on going, and we weren't anchored into anything. So from a firefighting standpoint, strategically this wasn't a good thing. But there was four of us, and it was going to be hours before any other resources came in, and so we just spent the next day or two out there with juniper boughs in this country, just exactly like it was just south of here, maybe few miles, maybe 5 miles south of here, and just for miles, just beating out the fire as it gets into the grass. And then when your juniper bough got shredded, you went and you cut another branch off and beating out the fire. And it would, I mean, it's not like fighting fire in Alaska, but it kind of is a little bit like that. We were just four of us. And, there were other project fires. We called them project fires back in those days. There were other project fires on the Tonto at the time, and our fire, we weren't going to get any resources for days. We knew it because everybody was already committed to those other fires. And so I remember the crew boss calling in, and the local fire control officer back in those days, the FCO, said, just keep pinching it off, just keep pinching it off. And you could see fire ahead of us, for miles. And there's four of us with juniper boughs. Yeah, we'll just keep pinching it off and just beating the fire as we go. And it was a couple days later when they finally called us and said, you guys can come down, and other resources started coming in finally. And so that was one of those kinds of fires. I called it, years later, when I started fighting fire with resources and with manpower and all that sort of thing, I look back on those days of fighting fire. I called it rat patrol firefighting. Because, you're just out there by yourself waging war with no resources. And, it was like guerrilla warfare of firefighting. You just kind of do what you can, just keep going. Hope you find some water that you can fill your canteens with. And
hopefully there's no more explosions.
And hopefully there's no more explosions. But that was the closest I'd ever been to an explosion that actually knocked me down. And I was a little bit in fear of my life at that moment when that happened. It was time to get the heck out of there. And the crew boss didn't really need to tell us to get out because I was going to be running away from there regardless. I'm glad he said so I didn't look like a chicken. Anyway, that's a little story from these hills where I started my firefighting at.